Hi guys, welcome back to Foliage Loft. My name is Liam, and today I'm going to show you some of the more weird and unusual houseplants in my collection. So just like everyone else, I really love plants that have really nice, beautiful green foliage, but I've mentioned a few times before that I actually really like weird and odd-looking houseplants as well. So my collection of weird houseplants is actually fairly small. I do have 4 plants that I want to share with you today. Going forward, I do want to try to expand my weird collection. So before we jump right in, I just want to remind you to please like this video and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't, as it does help us out a lot. So first up is the oddly beautiful Oxalis Triangularis. This is also called the false shamrock. So I picked up this plant about 6 months ago, obviously for its strange and unique appearance. I think it's really interesting looking. It has these triangle shaped leaves, and there's 3 leaves on each stem. It's kind of where the name Triangularis comes from. And it's got this really beautiful deep purple color and these really long and strange petioles. They're very kind of long and stringy. And not only does this plant have kind of a unique appearance, it also has some strange behavior too. So during the day when there's a lot of light available, these leaves will kind of spread out and open up. And during the nighttime, these leaves will kind of close up, and you can kind of see the ones on the outside have already closed up. Hopefully it's focusing there. And you can see the 2 leaves here in the middle. Those ones are kind of in the transition phase. They're kind of halfway shut. So we tend to think of plants as these static, unmoving objects, but they are living creatures and they do move. So yeah, there are different terms to describe how plants can move in response to a certain stimulus. This plant, it's kind of phases through the day and night. That's referred to as photonasty, which is kind of a funny word, but it just means that it changes its position depending on the time of day. And this movement does take some time to take effect. So I think with this plant, it takes about 2 hours to go from fully spread open to fully tucked in. So it's pretty hard to see it if you're just watching the plant. You're never going to really see it moving. But if you were to film it and then speed up the footage, you'll be able to see the plant kind of opening and closing in time. It's pretty neat. And you may think that these kind of look like flowers a little bit, and they do kind of resemble flowers, but they are not flowers at all. These are the leaves. This plant does flower occasionally, but they are trumpet-shaped white flowers, unlike the purple or green foliage that the leaves have. So another strange fact about the Oxalis Triangularis, it's actually one of the few edible houseplants. So you can eat the leaves of this plant as well as the rhizomes. So that's our first weird plant, the Oxalis Triangularis. And on to the next weird houseplant on my list. This is the string of turtles. So this is a plant that was on my wish list for a while in 2020, and I was finally able to find it at a local nursery. The botanical name for this plant is the Peperomia prostrata, so it is part of the Peperomia family, although it's pretty unique among Peperomia. A lot of Peperomias tend to look quite similar to each other. This one is kind of wildly different from all the other ones. So the first weird thing about this plant is obviously this turtle pattern that appears on each one of the leaves. It's very odd and striking and very unique. And in addition to the turtle patterning on the leaves, these leaves are also really soft and fuzzy, which is kind of a fun little weird fact about this plant. And another odd thing about this plant, it does flower. So each one of these little curled things that you can see here, these are the flowers. They're like flower spikes. Not your typical pretty flowers, but they do serve the same purpose for the plant. And some people will just cut these off. They do use some energy that the plant could use towards starting up new foliage, but I actually just kind of like the way they look, so I do leave them on here. And very quickly with this plant, you can see it'll start to trail. So as soon as these stems reach the edge of the pot, they'll start to cascade over. And I think it just looks really cool. It's also really low maintenance as well. So you could probably leave it in a pot this size for a couple of years at least. You don't need to repot them quite often. They don't really need super high humidity either. They can be a little bit prone to overwatering and root rot. They do hold some water within the leaves, so you do have to be careful when you water this one. Just make sure you're not letting it sit in any water. But apart from that, it's a pretty low maintenance plant. So that's number 2 on my list, the Peperomia prostrata, also known as the string of turtles. This next plant on my list was actually quite rare in both the US and Canada up until about 2 years ago. So this is the Pilea Peperomiodes. So this plant has a few nicknames as well. I've heard it referred to as the Chinese money plant, the friendship plant, which I'll explain that name a little bit later. It's also called the satellite dish plant for obvious reasons, or the UFO plant. And the UFO plant or the satellite dish plant obviously refers to these really cool, interesting round leaves. So there are some other houseplants that have round or oval leaves. The string of turtles was one of them, but nothing quite looks the way this one does. So it's got these long stems or petioles and these almost perfectly round leaves, which are really, really neat. So one of the things that you might notice when you pick up the plant to move it, they kind of bounce around, which is pretty fun. It's just overall, it's just a really fun, kind of wacky plant. I really like it. So I did mention this was referred to as the friendship plant, and the reason for that is that this plant just propagates itself. So with a lot of other plants, you'll have to take a leaf cutting, put it in water or soil, and wait for the roots to develop, and then you can have a new plant. With this plant, it basically just propagates itself. So you can see in the soil, I already have a little pup growing here, and a pup is just like a baby plant. So if you give it enough time, these pups will grow, and eventually you can just separate it from the mother plant, put it in its own pot, and you have a brand new plant that you can share with your friends. So that's why it's called the friendship plant. And this is another plant that's super easy to grow. It's not super picky. It'll do fine in just regular household humidity, temperature levels. It does like bright indirect light, so make sure you have it by a window. This plant has been pushing out new growth over the winter. So I think over the winter it's already put out a handful of new leaves. And I think these can get pretty big. So I'm kind of looking forward to the growing season this year, just to see how large this one will get. But yeah, overall it's just super easy to grow. It's really fun to look at, and it's a great plant. The Pilea Peperomiodes. And the final weird houseplant on my list is this dainty little fern, the Maidenhair Fern. I think from some angles it does kind of just look like a regular little houseplant, but when you look at it from other angles, you see just how flat some of the fronds are. I think it's just really neat. The way it grows is really interesting. And I think because of this almost flatness to some of the leaves, I think it gives it a really nice, delicate and airy appearance. I think it gives it a little bit of that kind of fairy tale forest appearance, which is kind of a really nice addition to your home. But yeah, some of these fronds here, they just seem to kind of float in the air, which is really cool. This plant I have right here is still fairly young and fairly small, but they can get quite big. So once they get larger, that kind of airy feeling just increases. So these plants do have a reputation for being a little bit on the fussy side, and the main thing is the soil moisture. So they do want to stay moist. Now they don't want to be soaking wet all the time because they will rot, but they also don't want to get too dry because they'll just crumble away. So you really have to find that nice balance point between the two extremes. I find that in the winter I'm still watering it, every probably 4 or 5 days. In the summer I'm probably watering it every 2 or 3 days. Thankfully it's pretty simple to water. I just put a little bit of water in the bottom of this cache pot, and I just pop the plant back in and allow it to suck it up. So I'll just let the plant sit there for about 15 minutes, and I will pull the plant back out and take a look. If there's any water still sitting in the cache pot, I'll just dump that back into the sink. And another fun fact about the Maidenhair Fern, this is one of the, I think the only plant in my collection that's actually native to North America, and that's where I live, so that's kind of cool. It is also normal for you to get some dead or dry leaves on this plant. If you do, just cut them away, it's fine, they'll be replaced, and that's just a normal kind of cycle of this plant's life. So this is the last plant on my weird houseplant list, the Maidenhair Fern. So that's all for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this look into my weird and wonderful plant collection. So if there's a weird houseplant that you love that I haven't mentioned today, please comment down below and let me know what that plant is, and maybe I can add it into my odd collection. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. See ya.